skip over all the other fun stuff. This is a website I refer to a lot, Mortgage News Daily. A lot of boring economic and mortgage information on here, articles. If you're interested, dig in. The thing that I like to reference the most is they do a kind of, consensus survey of all the major mortgage companies across the US, and they get an average of what a 30-year fixed interest rate is as of today. You can see 5.5%. I won't stick here too long because no one wants to see the bad news, but this is where we are now, compared to the last few years. Pretty close to where we were in 2018, not so far off from where we were in 2014, but you can see we're kind of at the 8-year high here, the 10-year high. So 15 years still under 5 is nice. But if you're ever curious just what your buyers might be seeing as far as rates out in the market, this is a pretty easy, quick resource. All right, jump into this now. Make sure I'm sharing the correct screen. Okay. And I forget, how do you start these?
Down at the bottom right, there's like a little slideshow right next to the Zoom part where you can like zoom it in, like we're just down a little bit, and then over that one.
This one?
Yeah, I think so.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Hey,
Property classifications. So this is probably going to be stuff a lot of so I'll skip through it pretty quickly. But obviously, primary residence, you're going to occupy that. You're going to live there. It's going to be your mailing address. If you don't have like a PO box within the first 60 days. 61 days and on, it's going to be a secondary home, vacation home. That's kind of a sticking point that we've kept an eye on lately. About 3 months ago, the Federal Housing Administration raised interest rates on second homes. You used to be able to get an interest rate for a second home pretty close to what you could get for a primary residence. So if someone was like, I'm going to move in at 65 days, no big deal, who cares? Now the rates are closer to what investment properties are, which is about 1.5 points higher. So something to keep in mind if you're thinking about, occupancy dates. And then non-owner occupied, that's what most of today is about. Investor, Airbnb, rentals, anything like that, flips, if you're looking at short term. This is an interesting one that we like to mention. If you're buying a house for a child, mother, or father, if your mother or father or your child have a disability, you can purchase a property for them considering it a primary residence. So you get the lower interest rates, not considered a second home or investment property. Yeah. I think it's because I'm connected to this.
I think it was. She said if you do a new share.
Got it. Let's try share. Did that work?
I can see, can you guys hear me?
Did that work, Dara?
Can you hear me at all? Can you, oh, sorry.
Technical difficulties.
I can't see that. I can see that.
Okay.
But it doesn't show me this point. I know. We might just have to update it right now.
It'd be exciting to watch back in the video.
And if you go to share screen, I'll let you share like. There you go.
Does that work?
And then when it goes into that, it's showing that.
Or does it show you like my preview screen?
It's showing like that, but like it's like buffering.
Does it change when I change it?
No.
Hmm.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything. Here now,
Okay.
but,
Maybe if I don't share maybe if I don't do the presentation,
maybe it'll work better.
I just stay like right like this. Is that working? You can see it there. Okay, yeah, we'll just stick with that then. All right. I think we got it figured out
Okay.
for those watching back at a later date. Investment ownership, pros and cons. So, obviously investing in property, you're investing in a relatively safe, investment. You build equity, you can leverage properties, you can spread your funds out over multiple properties using financing so that you can kind of maximize your portfolio. A lot of what I do is take someone who maybe doesn't have a property or has, maybe their first 1 or 2 properties. How are we going to take this to maximize the next few, and using the current rents offset those mortgage payments so you have room to purchase more into the future. They tend to be great clients for us because they are generally, it's not their first home. It is not the home that they're going to be living in. The emotions are there, but not quite as much as a first-time home buyer that's moving into the dream home. If something goes wrong that's outside of your, what you can control, they tend to understand. They don't get too upset. So I love working with investors. When I started working with Sean, I took over a big portion of his investor portfolio just because at the time, investment interest rates were insanely low, and while we had a ton of clients. And then cash flow, you'll hear me refer to that several times. Cash flow, meaning once all the rents are collected, all the bills are paid, what's the bottom line? Are you winding up with anything per month? And the great reason to purchase investment here in the Cleveland area is the cash flow number is high here. I work with a ton of Californian investors who are selling everything they own in Sacramento and LA, and they're buying here because the bottom line number is way higher. There, they might be paying per month to own these investment properties. Even after they collect rent, they're just hoping that the equity continues to go up. They're finding that places like Cleveland, way better place to invest. The cons, landlord responsibilities, you're going to have that. A lot of these properties, especially if they've been rentals for a long time, you're going to find them in relatively rough condition. Maybe the utilities are a little bit older. You're probably going to have some follow-up responsibilities there. My recommendation is, if the cash flows well, take a little bit of that cash flow and hire a management company to take care of that for you. We'll talk more about that later. If you guys have any management company people you'd like to work with, let me know so I can refer them out. Vacancy, that's kind of a big one. You never know if you're going to have a downtime where you're just going to have to carry that mortgage because you're not collecting any rent. And then startup costs. Investment properties do cost quite a bit to get started. We have ways, once you get started, we have ways to access some funds. I'll get into that more here in the next few slides, but you are going to need a little bit of seed money to start. Investment options, owner occupied. We don't do a ton of these, but I think in a normal market we would. You can buy 2 to 4 unit properties where you live in one of the units and you can rent out the other ones. The awesome one is with FHA, you can still do 3.5% down on a multi-unit primary residence. Now, whenever you go to conventional, the 15% down for a 2-unit, 25% down for a 3 or 4. And even with this 15% down for a 2-unit, the rates are going to be pretty tough. I would probably say consider 20 or 25. And the income from the other units can be used to qualify. One of my favorite things to do with FHA is you can use prospective rent. So what you anticipate the other units or the other unit to generate in rent to help offset the mortgage payment right up front for qualifications. So pretty cool that they let us do that. You know, one big thing is if you have an FHA buyer who's looking at a multi-unit 3.5% down, not only are they jumping into home ownership most likely for the first time, they would be hopping into being a landlord for the first time as well. So I just try and make sure they understand there is a lot of responsibility with what you're getting yourself into, but we've also done plenty of ones where people have done the 3.5% down FHA, get a bunch of equity, sell it, and then they are moving on to their next, house in the next few years. Non-owner occupied, that's what you're mostly going to see. Classic rentals or flips, one unit, so just single family homes, technically 15% down, but it's pretty much 20. That's where interest rates are really tough. Non-owner occupied investment properties, you get hit kind of the worst on interest rates. I would even say 20% is tough. I would consider 25. 2 to 4 unit, 25% down is the minimum. So when I was talking about startup costs, that's kind of what I'm talking about. You're going to have to, even if you're looking at a $100,000 single family, you're going to need to come up with at least $15,000 out of pocket for down payment, plus another maybe $5,000 for closing costs. And honestly, you probably want to put more like 25 down just to avoid having, pretty tough interest rates. And just like before, rental income can be used to qualify. If you have history of being a landlord, I believe that's the only catch, and the current property is being leased, I can use the current lease income to offset the current mortgage, which is awesome because it's almost like you don't even need to qualify. It's just already offsetting itself. Rates and points. So you are definitely going to see higher rates on these, like I mentioned, and as of lately, you're definitely going to see some points in there. I did a lock for an investor on Monday, I think. It was 6% with 1.5 points. So that sounds like a big, and wow, 1.5 points and 6%. My gosh, it's still cash flowed. So, and I think we ran the break-even numbers at like 4 months. So they were going to break even in 4 months anyway. So it still makes sense. It's just a shock for a lot of investors who've been buying over the last 2 years who are used to 4% interest rates. Additional reserves are required, especially if you own several properties. I'm doing a loan right now for someone that owns 7 properties. They have to show that they have $70,000 in their savings or 401k just for reserves, not funds we're going to use. The lender wants to see that you've got money saved up. Down payment and reserves increase when you own additional, that's what I just said. Seller concessions capped at 2%. We don't see too many, seller credits, but it's kind of tough whenever you get to renegotiating on a property that needs a little work. It's capped at 2%, and that's kind of a line in the sand. There's no way around it. No gifts. It's got to come entirely from your own funds. If you know a property management company, like I said, let me know. I'm always looking for someone to refer. And I highly recommend to all of my investors, one of the last things they ask about, especially if they're out of state buyers, who am I going to have go mow the grass? If I have someone to refer all of that to them, I love to do it. Investment property for your IRA. Sean always references back to someone he did an investment property purchase for, who literally took $150,000, bought this property and just sat on it. I think his son was like 5 years old. He's like, well, in 13 years, I'm going to sell it, and this is going to be his college fund. It's like, hey, that's, And if you look back 15 years ago, he probably could have put 2 kids through college now with how much values has gone up. Funds to close. So this is, like I said, money you're going to have to come up with out of your own pocket. Checking and savings is most common. You got some money saved up in your checking or savings account, super easy, a couple of bank statements, no big deal. Retirement savings and investments. You can draw from your 401k. Now there are, I have it down at the bottom, taxes and penalties, question mark. Yes, if you pull that money out and you don't pay it back within the set time that the 401k terms and conditions lay out, you do have to pay taxes and you might have to pay a penalty on that. Now, you're moving it to another investment, so some people don't have a problem with that. What I see most often is we've got this 401k. Why don't we get a secured loan against the funds in the 401k? We'll just get a loan against an asset, no big deal there, and we'll use that money, kind of like a home equity line of credit, for your down payment and closing costs. The other item is a home equity line of credit. You can always, take out a line of credit against maybe your primary residence and use those funds, or cash out refinance. Cash out refinance, I do it all the time where, we'll do 3 properties for someone, 1.5 to 2 years down the road, the house has gained a bunch of equity. They want to cash out, pull out some of the money, maximize their financing on those, use it to buy 3 more properties, and then use that again to buy 3 more properties a couple years down the road. So that's kind of how we game plan to maximize someone's portfolio. Conventional lending allows you to carry 10 mortgages at one time before you would no longer qualify for conventional financing, and then FHA will allow you to have 1. So realistically, someone could have 11 properties mortgaged through the normal means that we have. So
You mean 10 total mortgages or 10 conventional mortgages?
So it's 10 conventional and 1 FHA. So if someone, and it's funny how often we actually do this, someone might have 5 or 6 properties, with conventional lending, maybe one of them is even their primary residence. And then they'll say, I want to turn my primary residence into my new rental, and I'm going to use FHA financing because I only need 3.5% down to go buy my new primary. And they'll do that. And then they'll live there for the required amount of time that FHA requires, and then they're going to do the same thing again, refinance it, turn it conventional, move on to the next one. Yeah. So there's definitely, different ways you can play with the rules there to maximize the amount of properties you have in your portfolio. Beyond that, what people are usually going to do is, maybe they cash out, pay one of those off, and, or move it into an LLC. There's a big caveat with moving homes into an LLC. You sign an affidavit at closing that says anytime the house transfers out of your name, the title transfers out of your name into someone else's, technically speaking, the loan could be called due. Even if you are transferring it out of your name into a business that you own, they technically could call it due at that point. So I usually give that little warning to my investors. You can do whatever you want, but just so you know, you did sign this piece of paper at closing. 1031 exchange. Has anyone heard of these before? Yeah. So you run into them a ton with investors. Basically, if you sell a property legally, you can move it into one of these exchange accounts, which gives you enough time to buy another property without having to pay capital gains taxes. When someone has money in a 1031 and they call me, their hair is on fire because that clock is ticking and they need to find a new property and they need to move these funds before they have to pay a bunch of taxes. So it's a nice, safe thing to move your money into and buy more properties with it. We make it pretty easy. If you have money in a 1031, all you got to do is send us your 1031 manager's contact info. We'll get everything we need from them, and they will facilitate the funds going to the title company. So pretty easy. Any questions along the way? No? Okay. Tax benefits. I'll get into the Schedule E. Is anyone familiar with the Schedule E? This is a tax form that's attached as an addendum to your 1040. I won't get a ton into this. I don't want to do like a tax accounting class, but I stare at these all the time, especially for the basically what we're going to do is you're going to list each property, and then you're going to do an itemization of rents collected, costs, you know, how much was your mortgage interest, your insurance, your taxes, your HOA, you know, any other costs, and then a bottom line number that says how much rents you actually collected at the end of the year. So there are a lot of tax benefits, and much like anyone's taxes, especially people that are self-employed, you can kind of play with the numbers, or rather your accountant can play with the numbers to maximize or minimize how much you're showing on your taxes or how much taxes you're going to pay. When people try to maximize or minimize rather their tax liability, it makes the bottom line number real small, and it means I can't use the realistic number to offset their mortgage. So I usually warn people, especially self-employed borrowers, we use that bottom line number. So if your tax accountant is really, really good at their job and you are writing off everything under the sun, we're probably not going to be showing enough to fully offset your mortgage on that property. So exactly, yeah, well said. Flipping rules, you know, I think everyone probably knows about it. FHA won't allow a property to transfer within the first 90 to 180 days of the previous sale. It can, I shouldn't say that it can't. 90 days, it can. 91 days to 180 days, it can, but it will likely require 2 appraisals, and it can't go up by a certain amount. So when you're purchasing investment properties with the interest of flipping it, just know if you're trying to sell it quickly, you're excluding a large portion of the market that would only be, you know, FHA buyers. Point of sale and escrow rules, I'm sure everyone's aware of those. It's just something to keep an eye out on, especially with investment properties. They always have something that was neglected, that was kind of lost by the wayside, and, you know, something we have to make sure either transfers over, or we have to put an escrow hold on at the point of transfer. You know, with investment properties, it's always something silly like chip paint or something. Changing guidelines. Investment rules are always changing. I am in the world, so I'm always keeping an eye on it. I try to, at any kind of class or anything I'm teaching, say, hey, this is the new rule for investment properties. But investment changes way more than even regular, owner-occupied primary residence guidelines do. So lender requirements sometimes. Landlord history. To use certain amounts of income or rental history, or rental income, I should say, you do need to have history of being a landlord. So that's one kind of catch there. Rental income, a rental assessment. We may have to do a rental assessment as a part of your appraisal, just to get a fair market rent for, one or all of the units. Leases, we will likely need those leases if we're planning on offsetting any of your current mortgage. And then tax returns, talked about that a little bit with the Schedule E. So yeah. Title can only go in an individual's name only. We can't do it in an LLC. That's why I said earlier, some investors will call me a week after they close. Hey, I want to move this into my business. Technically speaking, you're not supposed to do that. We will, which is why we will only close it in the name of an individual or in their trust. We can do it in a family trust. Yes.
So when we see properties that are in the name, that are investment properties that are in the name of an LLC or something like that, does that mean that they most likely bought it in cash, or?
A few ways. Could have bought it in cash, could have bought it commercial lending, where they're going off the credit score of the business and the credit profile of the business. They could have purchased it through a regular residential lender like myself, and then quit claim deed it over through title into their business's name, and the lender probably just didn't notice. Yeah, so I mean, it's not uncommon, especially in the investment world. I mean, most of these houses are either in a trust or in the name of an LLC. So yeah, a few different ways, I'd say. Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. If you find any kind of local bank that's holding most of those loans on their books, you know, a lot of these rules not necessarily apply. They create their own rules, so you might run into something different with them than you might with us. But yeah, like you said, it's their loan, so you know, who cares? Multiple properties at the same time. I like to kind of tout this as something that we're really good at. I can copy multiple files at one time. It'll go to the same processor. It'll go to the same underwriter, and we can do it all at the same time. I've done, the most I ever did was 3 properties at the same time from one person, one buyer, and they all closed on the same day. It's just, you know, one 30-day process. They all closed. It was pretty seamless. Zoning distinction, something to keep an eye out on. We run into, because we do 1 to 4 unit residential, people will look for 4 units because all they see is dollar signs. Well, it might look like a house, but if the county is zoned it as an apartment, we're out the door at that point. Now it's commercial. So it's important for us to look up on the auditor's website the zoning distinction, residential versus commercial. And then I was talking to Rick just the other day. I can't do commercial lending. It's not something we can broker out. It's like a totally different process, so to say. I wish that we could do it, but I'm not able to. If you need someone that does commercial lending, I will dig into it. I've got a short list of names. I know a guy that works for a real estate company that does only in commercial properties. He sent me some of his lenders that he likes to use. They're, you know, it's kind of a different world from us, right alongside us. But all they do is the commercial side. And then, you know, get pre-approved. Obviously, if anyone has any questions or has buyers out there, let me know. I'd be happy to help. So, any questions?
Yeah, I never have really worked with many investors, and I've always thought that I should eventually do that.
Yeah. I kind of accidentally wound up in an investor network. I started with Sean. You know, he kind of said, hey, no one's been like really focused on just the investors in the branch. You go ahead and start working with some of these investors. So I started working with them. We had a really good experience, and I found out that they communicate through like these Facebook investor networks that are national. I didn't even ask them to throw my name out there, but suddenly the phone started ringing where investors in California were just calling me because they wanted to buy here and they wanted to get pre-approved. You know, some of those we are kind of plugged into. Some of them, the phone rings and they say, hey, you know, if it's a California number, hey, you know, so-and-so from this network told me to call you. But if you can find those and get into those, yeah. I mean, like I said, they're great clients. They're for us, their finances are always crazy because they own a ton of properties. A lot of them are self-employed. One of my favorite guys, Keller agent in San Mateo, California. He just was a go guy. I've never met anyone that talked that fast on the phone. And I would call him at 9 a.m., which is 6 a.m. his time. But he had just a ton of properties, a lot he owned in cash, you know, maxed out all of his mortgages, so much so that we put 2 of them in his wife's name just to make it work. And yeah, I mean, great guy. He, you know, 6 a.m. he's giving me book recommendations, you know. So yeah, definitely something I'm glad I got plugged into it. I learned a lot, and you know, you do a ton of business because once you impress them, they're back for more and more and more, and it doesn't really stop. So cool. Well, I appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. If you have any questions, let me know.